lies in the power of Lee's network, right? So we have over 46,000 leaders within the Lee network that are doing phenomenal work throughout the nation. And all of these people are connected to you, and you are also a part of this network. So we are excited to continue to create space for you all to connect with one another, to grow, to learn from one another, and to begin to tap the power that exists within Lee's network. So I just wanted to offer you an image so that you can just start to picture yourself within Lee's network and understand that everyone that is listed here that is in a position of power is literally someone that you can connect with at the click of a button within Lee. So super excited for you all to continue to grow and just tap into all that Lee has to offer you. All right, so today we are going to create space to hear from some of the same leaders that we just mentioned within the Lee network, and they will be here to discuss with us around their own stories and authentic storytelling and how they have navigated policy and advocacy career spaces using this tool. So before we dive in, I will introduce each panelist for you. We have Candelario, who's the head of the National Latinx Alliance. We have Latricia Boone, who is the vice president of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And we have Godfrey, who's the director of regional leadership development here at Leadership for Educational Equity. And apart from these titles that I just mentioned, each of them wear a bunch of other hats as well. So hopefully through the panel, you will be able to learn more about their experience and be motivated in what they have to offer. And then we will also create space at the end of the panel for you all to ask questions. So I'm going to ask that you all change your settings to be spotlighted once Chrissy stops sharing her screen so that you can see the speaker in the moment. And if you have questions on how to do that, you can just go to view at the top of your screen in the right-hand corner and click speaker view, and it'll show the speaker. All right. Chrissy, I think you have to put your other computer on mute because you're the speaker on my end, but I'm not sure if that's happening for everyone else. So welcome to our lovely panelists. I am so excited to have you all with us tonight, and thank you for saying yes to Lee and to pouring into your colleagues. So I'm going to ask my first question, and this question is for everyone that's here on the panel, but I will start with Latricia to answer it. And the first question is, who or what in your life introduced you to your calling in civic leadership?
All right. Thank you, Cheryl, for putting me right on the spot now. Good evening or afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. I am a former Lee staffer, and so my Lee membership comes through my staff work with Lee, and I haven't done a member event in some time, so I'm excited to be back in community. This feels like family and coming home for me. In terms of like my first kind of entree point into civic leadership, I think one, I'll say the person that comes to mind for me first is my dad, who was someone who was very involved in from an education standpoint, in my schooling, and very active on the PTA, active locally. I would go to meetings with him, school board meetings. And so through those experiences, begin to see that how of my voice or members of a community's voice. And I actually saw actions that took place where I'm like, wow. And I was very young at that time. And then I also had a neighbor who was a council member. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, where I actually just moved back to and live now, my hometown. But I had a neighbor who was on the county council. And so I was very aware of her work in that space and got an opportunity to like work on campaigns. And I was young, I was looking in elementary school. So like handing out flyers, walking the community, door knocking, doing things like that. So I would say those were my early experiences. Over time, just when I was an undergraduate, I went to Howard University. I was a journalism major, and part of a reporting and writing class that I had, we had to have a beat, and my beat was the mayor, which was interesting for those who know DC politics. The mayor at that time was a mayor that had some scandals and other things, but he was reelected back in office. And so that was just like a hot beat to cover. And I covered the council and a lot of their issues. And that's when I really started to understand the meaning of policy, like in a deeper way, and how I had volunteered up to that point for different things, but how some of the issues that I cared about on an individual and a personal level could be changed in a systemic way or be expanded, and my impact could be expanded if I was involved in more of a civic way. So it's grown and evolved over time, but those were some of the early experiences that introduced me to what civic leadership was.
Thank you so much, Latricia. Godfrey?
Thanks, Shoah, and thanks, Latricia. Hi, everybody. I'm Godfrey. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am Zooming in from Los Angeles. For people who know the LA area, I'm in Koreatown. I think there's a series of maybe like 3 stories that got me to my point in civic engagement. So I'm a queer Filipino immigrant. My family moved here from the Philippines to Los Angeles in 1988. Tells you a little bit about how old I am. But I was in school. I was in the 2nd grade for the 1992 LA uprisings, which for those of you who remember, the 1992 LA uprisings sort of emerged from the acquittal of 4 police officers who were caught on video beating Rodney King, an African-American man here in Los Angeles. It's one of the first memories I have of police brutality caught on tape. And during the uprisings, I was still going to school, and I was going to a predominantly Black school here in LA Unified School District. And I would come home to my parents, who are both Filipino, and I remember them using really racially coded language to just tell me things like, be careful who you hang around, don't trust everybody, not everybody's a good person. And I like heard race in what they were saying, even though I was like in the 2nd grade and I didn't have the language of that being racially coded. And I knew enough to distrust it. And so I knew from like the 2nd grade that like the people who were helping me grow up, my parents who love me so much, were like feeding me this poison, coming from like parental instincts about like wanting me to be safe. But I was already very aware that here in the United States, I was having to negotiate different narratives of the world based on race. Eventually, that, fast forward, eventually I found myself doing Teach for America, teaching middle school, because I wanted to do racial justice work, in particular with younger generations. And so the second story is my first week of school, teaching 7th grade reading in Houston, Texas. I had 49 kids in a classroom with 35 seats. I had kids sitting on the floor, teacher desk, didn't get the roster until day 1, and that's why I didn't have enough seats. And in the middle of class, there was this student, a 12-year-old Latina girl who other teachers had warned me would be really mischievous. And I really hated that, like that I would get like warnings from other teachers about kids who I was just meeting. I didn't want to develop reputations for them. But sure enough, middle of class, she was sitting in the back of the class, got up out of her seat, walked up to me in front of the classroom, handed me a note. It said, "F you, Mr. Plata" on it. Didn't say F. She ran out the door. I went to the door. I looked down the hallway. She was gone already. And I was like, oh no, I'm a new teacher. Don't know what the protocol is for what to do here. Do I like write her name on the board? Like, what do I do? And I remember calling the assistant principal, who was also a Latino woman. And her first words to me were, "Do you want to press charges on her?" And this is a 12-year-old girl that I had just met, did not meet her family, new to this school. And I was already being asked if I wanted to be complicit in sending her into the hands of police officers. And I think those 2 experiences like were pivotal in bringing me into organizing around like the school to prison pipeline. It was through Lee, actually, that I began to get exposed to organizing, which I think organizing can definitely be a contributor to policy and advocacy work, because sometimes we envision policy and advocacy to be folks alone in a room somewhere making asks of important people. No, we bring our communities with us. So my third thing is Like now I've had the experience through Lee of having had conversations in my apartment living room, in school cafeterias, in gyms, and like taking the stories and people who have stories of the school to prison pipeline in Houston, Texas. And together we were able to support the Houston Independent School District to divest from a private prison company which had built a alternative school for our students who are overly suspended, $11.9 million going to facility that was built to be a prison, but we were sending our overly suspended students to. And with a year and a half, 2 years of organizing, that place no longer exists. We were able to create social emotional services at a district level where they did not exist at all while I was a teacher. And so that kind of like bit me. I was just like, oh, this is possible. Like it works. Like apartment conversations turn into systemic change, and it's just people power, regular people power that helped make it happen. And so that kind of got me in, and I can share more later about where I've been since then.
Yes, thank you so much, Godfrey, for sharing your story and just kind of going through like the ups and valleys of the different points that contributed to where you're at within your career. So thank you for that. And Candelario, last but not least, we would love to hear what got you going in the field of civic leadership.
Hi everyone, I'm Candelario Cervantes. My pronouns are he, him, his, and el, and I'm calling in from the ancestral lands of the Karankawan, Coelicacan, Atayekpak, Ishak, and Sana, or current day Houston, Texas. I have the privilege of being the head of our national Latinx alliances at Teach for America, so I serve as one of our national diversity executives. And I always share my story. They start with my ancestors, right? And I think I put that into the chat. Like, who do I want to be? I want to be a good ancestor. And I think we need to start thinking about that now. Like, what legacy do you want to leave? Who's that ancestor that you want to be for the next generation? And I start my story with my abuelitos, my grandparents. They came to the US around 1900 and settled in South Texas. And they instilled the importance of education in us. And they always said, hijito no tienes herencia, like, son, you don't have an inheritance. Your inheritance is your education. One, because no one can take it away from you. And two, public education is free in this country, which is something I think sometimes we take for granted. But they instilled that in me and in my parents, and both my parents, right? So my other folks are my parents, right? That inspired me. My mom was actually the first in our entire family to graduate and go to college. And I always tell her thank you, right? Because I reflect back, for a Latina to do that at that time and in that area is like somewhat unheard of. So I always tell her thank you, because she literally changed the trajectory of our entire family. So I think through them, right? And they were actually the advocates in their way. My grandparents, right? They didn't know English. They were sharecroppers, but they're the ones that were advocating for the other sharecroppers that didn't have the different types of privileges that they had. This is something else I always elevate, is like, yeah, we all have privileges, earned and unearned. And my abuelitos, like, they really did share that, right? Like, they had the ability to, advocate. They had children that spoke English that were being educated that they could then leverage to make sure that they're serving our community. My parents did the same. My mom, as she graduated, she became a teacher, and she was one of the first. And then she became a teacher at the Wharton County Junior College, and she taught GED and adult basic education. She's also one of the only Latinas that was faculty at that community college. So she was able to learn how to navigate the systems and structures. So they were able to advocate for other students, other community members that didn't have the privilege to learn how to navigate this very complicated system and structure. They even advocated for me, right? Because I was tracked to not go to college in rural Wharton, where I grew up. And they're like, no, his scores are really high. He actually needs to be in honors classes. So in partnership with my teacher, Ms. Raff, and my parents, they were advocating for me to do that, right? So even in that, my own lived experience, going through K-12 and seeing how that played out, not having to take, run for office or these different things, right? But like, in these ways, you're advocating. and leveraging your privileges. So for me, when I think about this work, I'm a very big believer about practicing what I preach, right? Knowing that our community is underrepresented in all these spaces and sectors and industries and elected office, right? Like I'm always advocating and pushing folks to run for office, like take advantage of these fellowships, do these different things, join Lee. So when Marcus Settles, who's our regional director for Houston, or for Texas now, like brought it to my attention that in Houston, for city council, District C, which is the largest district of all of Houston, 10 candidates were running, but there were no BIPOC folks running for office. I was like, oh my gosh, like what? So like, this is also like 6 months before November, so not much of a runway. You know what? I did my research, right? Because I also love that you call it a calling, because it is a calling, right? Like, none of this is easy. But you know, I went to their city council meetings and I saw our community members advocating, like, you know, this is ingrained in my memory, like an elderly woman who was Latina, advocating to have her sidewalks cut back, right? She literally had to go to City Hall to advocate just to have her sidewalks carved back because she was on a walker. And she was like, I'm tired of people calling me stupid woman when I'm walking in the street trying to go get my groceries because I can't get by because the sidewalks aren't cut back, right? That should never happen, right? It should never happen. So that actually motivated me to actually put my hat in, knowing all the barriers, right? And I had already gone in like, this is gonna be a really, really hard race, but knowing that if I'm the one that's going to be at those tables, you know, running for office and in all these different spaces, like just my presence and just having like students seeing my yard sign in this region, right? Like what? Like someone's running for office in this district that, you know, has a Latinx last name. That really did sit with me. But then also when we were in those panels, like I was the only one talking about equity. I was the only one talking about how do we think about bringing in all the different voices across the district. And that pushed the other candidates to also start like talking about it. Like, I think those are the different things that I really start to consider. And so, yeah, I think when you talk about that calling, yeah, I think you just really got to reflect back and like, what is it that you really want to do? And take advantage of all the opportunities that are available. I think that's something else that I really focus in on. Like there are so many opportunities, so many resources, so many organizations, but our folks just don't know that they exist or they find out too late. So what do we do to help increase that awareness? And that's kind of now my calling is that, like, how do we help increase the awareness and provide access? Much like my grandparents.
Thank you so much. And I love how each of your stories were grounded in your childhood experiences and how something within your childhood or something that you experienced along the way within your educational journey prompted you to take an interest that then led you to realize that it is a calling, right? The reality is like a lot of people, we are called to lead, and it's about us tapping in and actually getting prepared to do that work and equipping ourselves with the community and the resources to do so. So happy that you all shared your stories around what brought you into this line of work. So Godfrey, this question is for you. How have you utilized storytelling when networking, right? We're here to talk all about networking and the power of authentic storytelling when doing so. So could you provide us with an example of how you've done that?
Yeah, I have two examples, I guess, that come to my head. I guess the first thing I want to do though is like clarify, like networking and storytelling sound like scary words because it's like, when I think of networking, I think of like passing a business card along. And so it puts like the burden on me to feel like I have to like prove something about myself or credential myself in the moment. And I actually think these words do a disservice to what we're actually doing, which is building a relationship. And so if you're building a relationship, the thing that's actually most important in that endeavor is listening and finding out something to remember the other person by, so that you give them something authentically to you, a business card, if you will, that you can only give, that they can remember you by, and you remember them, and you're kind of like forged with that link. So two examples come to mind. One is, I guess, more professional. The other is a little less professional, but I think it's helpful to hear both examples. The professional example I'm thinking of is, like Candelario, I actually also have run for office, because once you turn into organizer mode and then you begin to see like, wow, you can knock on doors and like get your community stories and like bring them out there. It's just, it is actually, you see the truth in like the power of that theory. And so when I ran for office, I was very much, this was pre-pandemic, very much on like, we are a major canvassing campaign going door to door to thousands of houses. And I remember one door that I knocked on, the person who I met at that door turned out to be a magician who was blind, right? Like when you open a door and you imagine politicians going to door, sometimes like, I mean, maybe this has happened to us. Sometimes, again, like what we expect is like someone to just hand us a business card and like sell themselves or something like that. But like if the job that we do in our networking to create an authentic relationship is actually to listen, you begin to create a container of just a few minutes that allows people to share how they live their lives. And so I learned that this man, Chad Allen, you go to Chad Allen Magic, he began to share how he's a magician, and he was running out of work because of his inability to see. And so like he began to reveal of himself, and I began to reveal work that I actually did in college. I was able to study abroad, and I actually did oral histories with folks in the blind community about what it's like to fall in love, because in our world, we focus a lot on this idea of like physical attraction, and physical attraction is really like rooted in sight, right? And so what happens when you take that away was like a question I was asking in the research that I was doing. And that research, I eventually took all those voices, those interviews, and turned it into a play. And so like I shared that little bit of my past. Like most people who are campaigning at your doors would never share a story like that, because you probably would never even get to the point where you're understanding the person at the door as deeply as that as well. So I guess like that's the main takeaway. I had another story, but actually we'll just leave with that one because I want to make sure that Latricia and Candelario have opportunities as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Either one of you can jump in and share a story around how you've utilized storytelling when networking.
Yeah, and I want to build on Godfrey's point around how networking can feel like this scary thing or this very formal thing, and the fact that it's relationship building, because I think that my philosophy is that every interaction that I'm having on most days is an opportunity for relationship building, and it's a part of that network building. And so I've met people in lots of different spaces and places, not just through my formal work experience, but through other experiences, and who've become a part of my network just because I've been able to build relationship. When I think about particularly the role that I'm in now, where I am literally every day through my work with the chamber on calls with members of our member companies. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization for a small, large, mid-sized, whatever business across this country. So the big corporate names that you might know, as well as small business owners. And so I'm meeting with these folks, having calls, conversations, literally every single day. For the purpose of, one, getting them to understand the work that I do around our Equality of Opportunity Initiative, but to Godfrey's point, understanding what they do and what their trigger points are, what's important to them, because that is what is going to allow my work to be able to have the impact that I need. So when I'm going into these conversations, I am literally talking about, which is very different from how a lot of my colleagues might show up at the chamber, but I am talking about my why for this work and my experiences. I'm looking for connection points. I'm often in conversations with people who, on the offset, they may not look like we share a lot of things. Maybe it's not identity, maybe it's not, but as you get into conversation, I learn things about them because I'm listening, because I'm asking questions, because I'm sincerely wanting to know more about their work, why they're in this space. And it also offers me an opportunity to find those connection points and share that with them. Connection points that may seem like the oddest things or things that you would naturally come to that place. But because of conversation and listening and understanding, it takes us a long way. And I'll give an example really quickly is I was meeting with a small business owner recently to talk specifically about an event that we were going to do together. And we started having conversation. We were talking about COVID and the pandemic and the crisis. And she started talking about, just the difficulty of what she's experiencing as a business owner, but the fact that all of her employees were not interested in getting vaccinated and the struggle she has around, wanting to encourage them to get vaccinated, but also wanting to respect boundaries and understanding. And we ended up having this really great conversation, but more than anything, I was able to connect her with some additional resources at the chamber. She's now going to be on another panel conversation we're having around vaccine hesitancy. So it's built relationship and made connection points that I otherwise might not have made. And also she's introduced me to some others in her network who are now going to be part of some of the work that we're doing. And so it really, truly, that came from authentic conversation, but also me sharing a little bit about my own background and experiences on a personal level that allowed her to open up and be more vulnerable in that conversation with me.
Thank you so much, Latricia, for that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to build on that. I think what I found is about what can I do for you, right? As opposed to what can you do for me mentality. Because I think a lot of folks are like, oh, like that kind of catches them off guard. So when you're helping them fill a gap, asking like, what are your priorities, right? And like really showing that interest. And I think very much what Latricia said, like it's building connections. Like you're always trying to seek connection. So for me, what I always start with is like where, like, home, like if there's a connection point there, or like, what are your interests as you're like actually building a true authentic relationship with someone. And I think that's something I've been able to leverage throughout my life. It's just like, I really want to get to know you as a person. So when you're in these like big spaces, or even now in the virtual conferences, it's not about trying to meet everyone in that room or in that space. It's about making 1 or 3 authentic relationships, because then you never know where those connections may take you, or you may never know like who they may know. And as you're starting to build those really like authentic relationships, they may be different connections that they can make introductions to you. And I always find like whenever you can show up or like send them a resource or like help them meet and one of the needs that they've done, like you just forge that real strong relationship, because they're like, oh, this person's really about it. And they really do care about me as an individual, which I think will serve you so well when you're running for office or like getting civically engaged. I think that's something that I try to do with our work on government affairs when we're meeting with members. Like, honestly, like, some of them won't take meetings from some of our partners, but they'll take a meeting from TFA. So I can be sure to say the same thing that our partners are saying in those meetings, right? So there's other ways of like, how do you elevate the voices of your community members or partners in these different spaces and leverage, the access that you may have. And that's a way of you showing up and building those long-lasting relationships.
One thing I wanted to add to Show on that point, I really appreciate, Candelario, you talking about the quality of those relationships versus the quantity. You don't have to go in and meet 20 people. It's not about that. If you meet build 3 really great connections, who knows where that can lead you. But also, really the point around how you may in that moment, again, getting back to the point of sometimes, a lot of times it's about what you can offer and not always about what you can get. And in that moment, you may meet someone and if you're just focused on what you can get, you may not see an opportunity or a connection point, but you never know down the road when you will need to pick up the phone and call or reach out to that person or what they may bring. So think of all those relationships, people you're meeting, experiences you're having as an opportunity that maybe you might not be able to leverage in that moment, but down the road in a future instance, particularly in the policy, advocacy, the civic leadership space, you just never know when you might. So continue to build on and nurture those relationships and make those connections, because I guarantee you, whether that person might introduce you to someone else in their network or what that may look like, but down the road, you will find that 9 times out of 10, those relationships that you are building will bring some level of breadth to your work and to your experience.
I'd also say, like, one thing I also do is, when I'm going to a conference, right, they have the agenda, they have the panelists, they have the speakers, do your research. Like, if you're going to go into a panel and conference, like, you're also spending money for a lot of these spaces, right? Do the research, like find out which panels or who's speaking on those panels, do the background research on those individuals. So you just get to learn a little bit about them, their work. You may even be able to like read some of their articles, so that when you're actually in that space, I think that's the other thing, like, how do we take advantage of those spaces, especially when we're talking to really busy people and at those conferences, like, hey, that's a great opportunity for you to connect. So sit in the front row, like go up after the panel. Cause this is the other thing, is like, I sit on a lot of panels and very few folks actually come up, but we're there waiting because I also want to connect with you. So like, try to put yourself in their shoes. But like, yeah, and then do the things that we talked about, like share like how you can help them, or if you saw that there's a pain point that they're doing or an issue that they want to take up, like offer your capacity in those spaces. And then you can always follow up later.
Yes, 100%. And thank you, Latricia and Candelario, because you all basically like magically led into the next question, which was around like, what advice would you give to someone interested in growing their network in the field of policy and advocacy as a person of color? And I feel like you both offered like some significant tips. And I also want to offer and lift up what Godfrey put in the chat around leading with authentic curiosity and pushing you to do that throughout your life, not just in workspaces, because a lot of times we're interacting with people, we're not even realizing that, again, those people can be a part of your network. And also when opportunities that you think or that you want to open up don't open up, still see it as an opportunity to network and to learn more, because in that specific opportunity may not be for you, but there's a larger, grander scheme of something that can happen just through that connection with that person that gave you that no. So Godfrey, I don't know if you want to offer a tip, and then I'm going to open it up so that you all can come forward virtually and ask the panelists any questions that you have in regards to their work.
I don't know, this is not like a silver bullet tip. Like, this is not going to like be magical, I think, in your life. Magic, I'm mentioning that a lot today. But I think as you network, as you aspire to make whatever impact you're making in policy or advocacy, again, I really want to disrupt this notion of like working just for like individual benefit and having to pursue individual routes to get there. Like, I think collaborating with people, working together on a project together where like credit is spread and distributed across like multiple groups or people, like that's coalition building. That is like the ultimate networking, because you're making an impact together. You're probably also stronger together, working as a team and as a group, rather than just trying to network for yourself and to benefit you and to benefit one other person. So I think that's what comes to mind as just like as a mindset tip. Like, in what ways can you or we who are on this Zoom right now be working together already? In things that are meaningful to us mutually.
Thank you for that, Godfrey. And I do think that was low-key a silver bullet, so thank you. So collaboration over competition. But yes, I would love to open this up to you all. Please, if you would like to put your questions in the chat, I can voice it over for you, but I would like to invite you to bring your voice into this space. So yes.
And Shella, I would just add one other quick tip while folks are coming up with a question around just thinking about how you expand your network. And I'm speaking very specifically about my own experience as someone who's been in the field for some time, but recently started in a new role in the last 6 months, and had to think about my network a little bit differently, because I had traditionally worked with certain groups. And now in this new role, I'm now working with more business organizations and working with folks who are working across all kinds of political spectrums and aisles and all those things. And a couple of things that I did was one, I actually went on LinkedIn to look up other folks who had similar titles or positions that I had and literally reached out to folks. Some of them were cold reach outs and some of them were, oh, I knew someone who knew them. Could you make an introduction? Because I realized that there's actually a small group of people who are doing work that is specific to what I'm doing. And in those conversations, I started doing intro conversations. They were like, I am so thankful to be talking to you because this is what I'm experiencing. And we like just started to make a connection. And it was just a sigh of relief because there are others out there like me who are doing similar work, who are experiencing some of the challenges and some of the wins. And to Godfrey's point, we started talking about coalition building and how we could work together on the policy front to actually move issues together. So that was really powerful for me. And then the other thing I did similar is I reached out to members of my network to announce that I had this new role and that I was looking to, meet others who are doing work in this space and they started making recommendations of people. You need to meet this person, you need to talk to this person, you do that. So those were other ways that I was able to expand my network to really add value to the work I was doing. And in those conversations, I did ask questions around, again, some of their pain points, what they're focused on, how I could help them. So that, again, as we're building relationship, I'm also thinking about in my new role, how can I support the work that they're doing in their spaces?
Gosh, I love all of that. Yeah, I also dropped in our alliances websites. So we have all our partners and collaborators on these websites. So if you're sourcing for different places to, get resources, or maybe there are conferences that are happening or different opportunities there, that's a good way to source the partnerships. And then you have pathways to them via TFA. Because we've built those relationships. I also dropped in our career resources document. So in that is our Latinx resources, but the partners have opened it up to anyone, because the way they view it is like everyone touches the Latinx community, just like Godfrey was mentioning. Like the more that you can show up and learn and go into these spaces and build your social capital, the better, is the way they view it. So they're open to everyone in our network. But I think for me, I'm also something I try to really do is like do my own interrogation. Like, what are the things I love to do? What are the things I like get a lot of joy of? And for me, I love to paint. Like, right, I love doing that work. And going into these spaces, I just had a meeting this morning where one of my introduction, like, oh, like she's an artist too. Had an authentic conversation. Her day job, she works for the city and she does like the coalition building for like, how do we stop the school to prison pipeline and school to deportation pipeline work. But we were connecting on the art side of the work. And like, if you're going to do different events or different programs that, feed that part of your joy, you can also network with other folks that have the same interest, because you never know like who those relationships, where they may go, where they may take you. And I think the biggest tool I've used in my career, I used to have a Rolodex. And I love that thing because you had all the business cards and I would write little notes on it. But in this digital age, like I've been able to convert everything to LinkedIn. And I can track folks like as they move, because that was a big flaw. Like I could never figure out like, oh, they left their job. I don't know what their email is anymore. But LinkedIn's been really helped me like one, maintain the contacts, but then also like authentically stay in touch with folks. So they give you the triggers on like happy birthday, like this is so-and-so's birthday, someone got a job promotion. So rather than just doing those little clicks that like happy birthday, I'm like, no, I actually take the time to actually write an actual note, because I really did want to say happy birthday and see how they're doing. Or like, I really want to congratulate them for that job or that role. So like just taking the extra step to do the like that authentic touch, it really does go a long way. And I've also started to nurture, and this is about now nurturing the relationships once you have them. Because I think this is a gap that some folks have is, yeah, they build it, but then there's like years go by and then like there's no nurturing of it. So one thing I've always done is for New Year's, I always send New Year's cards to all of my partners. And they're not just regular, like, at TFA, we have like these templated email or like newsletter or holiday cards. I actually write like a handwritten note. It's a lot of work, but like, I really want to do that, right? So I handwrite those things. Or even if you're doing a templated letter to constituents or other folks, like take the time and just do like sign them. Like I've signed, I don't know, a couple thousand like letters, and you just do it over the days. But it goes a really long way, especially in this digital age, because they're like, oh my God, they actually took time to do that. Those are just some of the things I've done over the years. Oh, and I also just randomly call folks. Like if I have your phone number, I'm just randomly going to call you because I was thinking of you. And that's something else I think I've learned through the pandemic. Like, yeah, I think that's personally like, right, like it's time so short. So many folks we've lost. Like, yeah, call that person when you're thinking of them, or send them a text, just to show that you're thinking of them.
Thank you all so much for all of these gems and just suggestions. And I'm super grateful that you mentioned the piece about nurturing the relationships once you build them and once you have them, and keeping in contact and ensuring that it is an authentic relationship. The same way you got it authentically, you maintain it authentically. So thank you for those tips. But yes, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I will give you all a few seconds to offer your questions. And if you want to come off mute, feel free to do so as well. All right, Celeste, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I have a question for the entire panel. Not all networking opportunities, as we all know, are welcoming completely to people of color, people of varied backgrounds. So what is your best advice for navigating a space like
that? I'm coming off of mute, Celeste, because I have more recently been in a couple of those environments and experiences. And in fact, I'll just be candid, like a couple of weeks ago, I went to one of my first in-person events for work. And it clearly felt like it wasn't a very welcoming event. And I had to actually ask myself, is it me? Like, am I feeling a certain kind of way because I don't see people who look like me in the room? And so maybe, or people who, you know, might identify in certain ways. And so maybe I'm feeling, but then I started to like move into conversations and realizing that it wasn't. And I have to tell you, I don't know, to Godfrey's point about the silver bullet, I don't know that I have a silver bullet for this either, but I definitely, one, I had done some research before going to the event. So I knew some of the people who were going to be there. And I just really tried to put my fears and insecurities aside and go and speak and talk to people and share. And I did leave that room with a couple of folks who I felt like I made good connections with. Even at first, it felt a little awkward and scary. And I also left the room recognizing that everybody in that room didn't feel like I should be in that room. And that was okay. Because the work that we do, as particularly the work that I do, you're not going to always be welcome in rooms and spaces, but that doesn't mean you don't speak up. That doesn't mean you don't talk about and share yourself. And I come with like the Latricia smile, and I'm just going to talk to you anyway, and whether you like it or not. And, you know, if I feel like someone is really giving me the cold shoulder, then I know to move on to the next conversation or whatever that may mean. Because to the point of the question you're asking, if you feel like you're not making connection, you don't have to force it either, because that's not authentic, right? And so you have to move on and recognize that maybe that wasn't the right connection point. And that's okay, because you don't want difficult relationships. You want relationships that are going to allow you to grow and build on. Don't have to be easy, but don't need to be difficult and challenging either. So I would say still bring a positive mindset, bring a great attitude and a spirit and your passion for your work. And that could be even like, as Candelario talked about, your work outside of your work. If you love to paint, if you love to draw, if you love book clubs, whatever that is, bring that, talk about it, those experiences. And I feel like you can make connection even in rooms where it doesn't seem like that. And if you don't let that discourage you or deter you from going to future networking opportunities. Continue to embrace them, because you will find ones where you do make connection and meet really great people to expand your network.
I'd love to build on that. In organizing and when you're running for office, like sometimes activists can be really caught up with trying to change the hearts and minds of those who seem to be in the way of like progress, who are like at the polar opposite of their point of view. And like to some extent, like if you know, if you feel safe doing so, like if that's how you want to spend your time, like certainly we need people to be able to like challenge folks who might be oppressive outwardly. But if like that's not your goal or your time in the moment, like in organizing and in politics, the biggest way to build power is to find your supporters. So to Latricia's point, like, yes, there are rooms that are going to be more unwelcoming than others. Do you need to be there? It's like a question I had, like, do you need to be there? Are there other ways to build your network beyond being there? Or there might be others there who you might find to be supportive in some sort of way, and those are the folks who you want to like weigh the most with. The second thing that I wrote down just as Latricia was talking is like, you don't need to do all the work yourself. Other people can credential you into those spaces. And so when you're networking, especially if you've got friends or already networked colleagues, they can help introduce you into spaces. And so it's helpful to think about what networks your friends have and your colleagues have, and then make the ask of them, similar to what Latricia was talking about on LinkedIn, you know, like have somebody make an e-introduction, literally have them make a real person introduction, like, like in a happy hour kind of space or whatever networking space you're thinking of. The last thing is, this is like a micro tip that was given to me. I forget where I even got this from, but I remember it being like, oh, wow, that actually really works. Is I really hate networking in environments. I don't know, I'm the person at the food table, and I'll hover on the food table and meet the people at the food table. That's true at bars and other places where you're supposed to meet people. But one thing that has been helpful for networking events is the tip of like, pretend you're the host. Like you can actually go up to people and be like, how are you enjoying your time today? Oh, did you go try that food over there? Like just like those are like easy hooks to break into a conversation that make you seem hospitable, give you a sense of someone's vibe before like feeling like whether or not there's like another entry point in some sort of way. So pretend you're the host.
I have like a little counter things too. Like I'm that person that's in those spaces, like, cause I don't know, I have a philosophy around like, we make the change like within the system. And it's hard, right? Like it is very, very hard. But I have found like being in those spaces and having the conversations and having authentic conversations, right? Like it helps me even think a little bit about different ways of like talking about the issues. So concrete example, like I go to a super conservative like men's group in the mornings, and I'm usually the only let the next person there, one, which is, but I leverage my privilege, right? I'm light skinned, and unless they know my name, like I can walk in that space. I'm white, right? So I leverage that privilege, but I think the thing I try to do in those spaces and leverage my privileges is elevating the voices of our folks. So I'm the one that's asking the questions around DACA, right? When DACA was happening, or like we're still in that fight, right? But like asking their perspectives, and then I had multiple conversations, and it was like small bites over time. It was like I think over 2 months of having these conversations with these groups. One of the men came up to me, is like, you know, you always talk about the DACA thing. Like, you know, I think it's our sin that we haven't solved like the immigration thing. I think it's our sin as the US that we need to solve this, right? Call it amnesty, call it whatever, like we need, it's our sin. And I was like, that word, right, was just so powerful that it helped me to rethink around like, okay, so maybe that is how I connect with the different folks and different audiences. So, but like, I think it's in those spaces that you do learn, but I try to go in with like, I'm gonna listen, right? And then take those nuggets to like, be able to navigate the other conversations or have those conversations in different spaces. But yeah, it takes a lot. And again, like to what Godfrey also, like, you don't need to be in those spaces, right? Like you also need to protect your mental health. Like you also need to protect you, right? And like, no, there are other folks. So I usually have other friends that go into spaces and like they give me the info, right? Or they're the ones making the introduction or helping me connect in those spaces where, you know, I wouldn't be welcomed. And, you know, that's another tool. I don't know if that was helpful.
Thank you so much for that tip. Celeste, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you for that advice.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So all of our panelists are able to be contacted on LinkedIn, and you all can contact them and reach out to them if you have additional questions or if you have anything that you're interested in that they do. If you paint, if you're interested in governmental work, if you're interested in organizing, wherever your interest lies, they are in fact a part of your network because they're a part of Lee's network. So so much gratitude sending you all's way for dropping all of these gems and just offering so much insight for our members to take and think about when considering authentic storytelling and networking. And now I'm going to create space for you all to do some of that amongst one another. So share your gratitude and affirm our panelists in the chat. If you can change your view to gallery view, that would be great. And for the sake of time, we are going to tap into what we call peak experiences, but we will not go as in depth as we have planned to, but it's fine because everything that you just got was like priceless. So it was worth everything. So thank you all so much again to our panelists. So yes, for the next 15 minutes, what we are going to do is have you all connect in pairs and just talk about your story authentically. We are going to share a worksheet with you that you can utilize after the session. You can go through it as a pair if you would like to have some structure within your breakout group, but I want to create room for you all to begin to authentically network and kind of process your experience in this space. So you will be paired with someone, and then when you come back, we will offer you some next steps and close out. So thank you again so much to our panelists, and we hope that you all have happy networking in your breakout groups. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Shoa. We're good, right?
No, thank you so much, Godfrey.
Yeah, cool.
That was
Herman.
awesome.
Yeah. I was like, Herman, why are you here? What are you doing?
Just helping support.
That's cool. All right.
Dion was supposed to be on, right?
Chrissy, can you pause the recording?
Oh, yeah.
Herman, I think you're on mute.
I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do they have the link to the peak experience worksheet already? Do we need to share it with them?
They do. I'll reshare them.
Cool.
So I think Herman is frozen. Herman?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry, my screen is frozen, but I have the audio. Hey, everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you had some good conversations and got to practice some of that relationship building and networking. And I just want to make a quick pitch on one of the worksheets that we went ahead and shared. I think Christy will go ahead and drop the link again in the chat, but it's called the Peak.
You're muted, Herman. Well, I'll help Herman out while he is working out his technical difficulties. He was sharing that the form that we shared is a peak experience worksheet that can help you begin to craft your story and just think about different aspects of your life and things that you would like to incorporate within your narrative and how to move it forward. And I will also share an additional resource, which is around storytelling from the Marshall-Ganz framework, that will also be helpful for you as you continue to just think about how to move this work forward and how to kind of naturally flow in that space when doing storytelling and when networking and connecting with other people. So thank you all for staying on. And we just want to share, go ahead. You good, Herman?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say thanks, Joe. And I was gonna say there's a storytelling workshop that we're gonna hold September 23rd. In case you want to continue this conversation, we'll go ahead and send links in the resource document.
Thank you, Herman. And I just wanted to share 3 next steps that you can engage in and just put what you've learned into action. So there are 2 national conferences coming up that you all may be familiar with. And if you're not, feel free to check it out. They're both virtual and they're online. So there is the CBCF, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, their virtual annual legislative conference happening September 12th through 17th. Again, the registration is completely free, and Christy will drop that link in the chat. And that's a great opportunity for you to navigate and explore the landscape of policy and advocacy, and also put your researching skills into action when considering panelists that you want to connect with and people that you want to talk and learn from. And then the unique thing about CBCF is if you are in the DC area, they will have social networking gatherings outside of the virtual conference. So you can connect with people virtually and then actually run into them in person. So that's something to consider. And then we have CHCI's 2021 Leadership Conference also happening September 20th through the 23rd. And it's a similar space as CBCF, and that is the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. They are having their conference as well, also free, also virtual, and Christy has or will drop the link in the chat. And the last opportunity that we would like to offer to you as a next step is our EPOLS program, which is our specific for people of color, and it's Emerging Policy and Advocacy Leadership Series. And EPOLS is a virtual community designed for LEE members of shared identities to go ahead and begin to build their skills necessary to launch their career in policy and advocacy. That is a program that is ran by me. It is highly favored with members, and it's also connected with the national conferences usually, but because of COVID, it is a standalone right now. But we will dive deeper into some of the things that we've discussed in this space. And it's a space for anyone that's interested in something new, that wants to explore the field of policy and advocacy, that wants to be able to do this along a cohort. It is a 2-week program, and it is happening on 2 Saturdays and 1 weekday. So that link will be dropped in the chat as well. And if you have questions around that, feel free to reach out to me. And the last thing before you go, the next slide, Christy, is I would just like for us to take a collective breath together, because we have taken in a lot, we have talked a lot, we have heard a lot. So I would love for us to just take in a breath and release it. And I would like to just offer this quote: storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today. So as civic leaders, as people that are interested in leadership development, as people working in leadership development, this is something to always remember, that there is so much power in your story. And last but not least, we have a quick survey. If you do not mind completing it, we would truly appreciate it. And Christy just put the link in the chat. She'll go ahead and play some music while you all are completing it. And I thank you all so much for joining tonight and taking time out of your busy schedules to pour into yourself and to learn and to continue to grow. So thank you all so much. I hope your time was useful. I appreciate you, and feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions that you have. Thank you, thank you. Christy,
Yes.
you're sharing your screen. And I think you can stop the recording now.
Thank you.